software development life cycle models. Some of the software development life cycle models which we have covered in software engineering, we'll quickly brush and we'll quickly brush those topics. And once again, then we'll move to software quality. We'll talk about requirements. We'll also talk about behaviors and correctness. We'll jump into the principles of testing. Then we'll see into the verification and validation part. And then the unit 2 is, you can see from the number of hours, it's comparatively the lengthy unit, which will talk about your white box, your unit interface and integration testing, and then it will also talk about black box. So all those numericals and other stuff we'll study here. And then we'll look into the need of management and automation. We'll talk about your test generation. We'll also look into some of the software matrices. So for this course, I have added you know a couple of reference books and your textbooks. So Ron and Patton is like very popular book. Your Aditya P. Mathur Foundation of Software Testing is yet another very popular book. On top of it, we will be covering since some of the topics. For that, we need to have this Roger Pressman's. Any possible addition will serve the purpose. And this is the evaluation. We'll be having two quizzes of 15 marks each. Then we'll have two assignments of 5 marks each, then midterm 25, 35. Any change, if you feel, you can suggest right now. So if possible, if feasible, we'll incorporate those changes, or else we'll freeze this particular part. So any possible suggestions for your evaluation method of this course? No. Okay, okay. So then we'll freeze this particular part. And now let's switch to today's discussion. Yeah, Shashwat quizzes will be obviously announced once, because it's online classes, so many times you people may face connectivity issues at your end. Sometimes you may also face power issues at your end. So keeping these points in mind, I'll go ahead with the announced quizzes always. And if everything goes well and we people meet physically in the campus, then definitely we'll have surprise quizzes and online, offline exams as usual, which we used to follow in the pre-COVID era. Right, so that particular part will be addressed. Now let's talk about your functional and non-functional testing. So these are like some of the topics which we'll be covering. In today's class, we'll deal with the introduction. We'll also see some of the software development life cycle models, and these are the books which will be preferring your software testing. And then you have by Ron and Patton. We have Aditya P. Mathur, and of undoubtedly M.G. Lime is a very popular book, which is also readily available on internet, plus in your library as well. And then we have the software engineering book for some of the basic topics initially. Evaluation pattern we have already talked about, right? So that's what we are freezing. We are whatever we saw in our CIF, that particular thing we are going to freeze today. That means will have your quiz with a weightage of 15 marks, which will be your quiz 1. Your quiz 2 will be of 15 marks. We will have two assignments. So your assignment 1 will be of 5 marks. Your assignment 2, once again, will be of 5 marks. And then you have your midterm, which will be for 25 marks, right? And then at the end we'll have your end term, that would be for 35 marks. So 35, 25, then 60, 30, and then 10. So that's In total you have like 100 marks, right? So this is what we are freezing these particular components. Still, if you have some doubts, you can drop me an email by end of the day today, or else we'll assume it to be freezed. Now, Google Groups, we will follow the same Google Classroom. I guess everyone, I have added some, I have received some emails from your end. To those people, I have already shared the group link. And even if you want to convey to some of your friends, so the class code for this particular classroom is your 4HX2Z O and D. This is what the class code is. So you can communicate to your friends if suppose they are not added. Even if someone wants to audit, he or she is most welcomed in this particular course. So to start with, what we have is we'll be talking about basics. We'll be talking about software development life cycles. Probably we'll finish these two things in today's class only. Now, the reason why I added this particular slide is to tell you from what all things we have moved to, what all options these days, right? We were having these, basic typewriters long back. In fact, not that long back, even 1.5 decades back, this was pretty popular. And these things, because I don't think you people observe these typewriters very often now and then. And obviously, if you visit the places like RTO offices, or if you visit, courts, then you'll find some people are still using it to type it, right? Or else these days, these typewriters have been replaced with these many devices. And even the handheld devices are also pretty popular these days. Your cell phones can also be added and can be replaced from with this typewriter, right? So that's how that kind of change we have observed. And then what we have is, sometimes back we were looking at these basic physical calculators. And from there we have moved to these scientific calculators, right, which are available in your with your operating system, right? In fact, the screenshot which I took is pretty old, which I took probably from Windows XP, right? These days, even this kind of calculator is also available in a very modified version, where you can have scientific calculators. Even these physical calculators have been replaced with your programmable calculators. Even in you people also use your scientific calculators in your exams and in your day-to-day computation, right? So this thing has no role to play in our life as such. In fact, for small calculations where this kind of device is required, we prefer to use our cell phones, right, which has also a capability, and the programs which are available with us, which can process these particular information. Now, when we talk about software, right, so software is nothing but a set of programs. And then we have like procedures, we have algorithms, and on top of it, something which is very important and very crucial is the documentation part, right? So uh, software package is not complete without this documentation, right? Software package is not complete without this documentation. And obviously with the operation of data processing system, because if I have any particular application these days, it would be having a database engine at the back end, right? So for anything and everything, I'll prefer to have an interaction with the sorry with the database engine. So this was about software, and now let's see what basically the software engineering is. So what we say is that this is something which is a form of engineering that would apply the principles of computer science and mathematics. Because see, computer science or engineering or software engineering is nothing without the mathematics, right? At the back end of the system, your computers, which is dealing with zeros and ones, it's all about mathematics, right? So it's a form of engineering that applies the principles of computer science and mathematics to achieve the cost effective solutions to the software problems. That means the problems which can be solved with the help of software. For those problems, what we do is we engineer the products. So in some sense it is nothing but the process of creating the software systems. And then what we have is the next part is where our main focus should be, which is your software testing. So what it says is that software testing is any activity which is aimed at evaluating a particular attribute or the potential or the capability of a program or a system, and determining that it meets the required results, right? And so this is another definition by Pan from CMU, who says that due to the limited understanding of the principles of software testing, though is a part of software engineering, still remains an art. Right, software testing, which is a part of engineering, still remains an art. Now, then we have a question, like where these softwares are used, right? So probably these days, I would say that this particular question is something which is incorrect, because uh, the question should be that where the softwares aren't used, right? To recall, right now, this online class is going on with the help of tons of softwares working at the back end, right? The thing which I'm writing on this particular on the slide because of some software applications which are running. My voice, which is being communicated continuously, is also because of some sort of software applications running at the back end, right? And all these things are happening just because of the software applications which are running continuously and providing the solutions, as we said, that will have something which will be your cost effective solution, right? So the cost effective solutions with the help of this. And the point is that anywhere and everywhere we find that these softwares are being used. Now now let's talk about purpose of software testing, right? So undoubtedly, for verification and validation, the testing is done. The verification of the software and validation of the software. We'll once again, throw some light on verification and validation, what these things are in the next few slides. And since we are dealing with verifications and validation, so in some sense, at the back end, we are improving the quality of the application, and we are working on the quality assurance part as well. Apart from this, what we can do is we can also estimate the reliability of my software application, right? Because at the end, i'll be you know I'll be using these applications tension free when I can vouch on a particular application that okay, this is something which is a very reliable thing, right? You people upload your files on Google Drive just because it's highly reliable. In fact, you trust your external hard drives and your storage which is there in your laptop or desktops. Uh, I mean, these things are not that much trustworthy as your Google Drive is, because there are chances of physical damage or loss of these things. But in case of your Google Drive, you will have a peace of mind that okay, this particular thing which I have uploaded, until and unless I'll not delete from even from the trash, then only uh, you know uh, I'll lose, or else I am pretty much convinced that this particular application is highly reliable, and hence it can be used without any doubt. Now, just imagine the products which these companies are providing to us. If they have some issues, uh, and if suppose the reliability factor is low, so undoubtedly, they lose the market value, and definitely you will also think twice, right? Majority of us are using Samsung devices in the form of cell phones, in the form of refrigerator, televisions, music systems, and whatnot, right? Just because we know the reliability factor of these things are very high. Now let's talk about the need of software testing, right? Because ultimately why we are paying so much attention on this, that's also a question to be, you know uh, that's also a point where you need to give some thoughts. Now, sorry. So what we have is, there is something which is affecting the product cost, and that obviously for because of software testing, what we are doing is we are increasing the overall product cost as well. Uh, Good amount of time plus effort, which is resulting into money, is you know goes into software testing, and still we focus a lot, right? So there is something, there must be something solid in terms of value, in terms of usage for software testing. That's why we are focusing a lot on this particular thing. Now, next point is like what to test and when to test. That's also another point where we say that, okay, what we can do is like, we should go for a right test at the right time, and on top of it, like when to test, right? That's also something which is crucial, and what to test. What is the right time to test a particular product or a component? That is something which is crucial. On top of it, what I should test, right? Whether it's a portion or it's the entire application. Uh, what should be the thing where we should have a good amount of focus, right? Now, testing basically, involves your manpower and consumes time, right? As I said, time, effort, which is resulting into giving a lot amount of money. So around 50% of the total time is consumed in testing the software product. That means this is something which is very crucial. I mean, 50% of the time is too much. 50% of the time is too much. So this is something which is crucial in every aspect, because irrespective of the fact, we know that this consumes a lot amount of time, this consumes a lot amount of effort, yet we are relying on these particular things. So at the end, we are getting a message that, okay, this is something which is very crucial. Now uh, now the point is that, if we got to know that, okay, this is something which is time consuming, this is something which is a costly affair, then can we afford to have 0.1% error in a mission critical software? Mission critical software means a software with a high importance, that would be dealing with finances, that would be dealing with life, right? So in that case, what I'm supposed to do is that, the point which I am trying to highlight is that in case of mission critical software, we cannot afford to even have a 0.1% error, right? It should be, a fully fledged application which is error free, and in that case only I can rely on the overall working. So there are like some incidents from the past which has resulted into, people giving a thought on, like, what basically what basically should be the overall effort to be given for cost effective application, right? Cost effective application with error free. So in past there were some incidents where we observed that, and where we concluded that software testing is something which is like very very crucial. Software testing is something which is very crucial, because the reason being, in past there were some incidents like London ambulance tragedy. So the reason why I'm adding it is, this is a very phenomenal paper. It has been cited, several thousands times, and this talks about, in fact, the title of the paper is also interesting. The title says a comedy of errors, the London ambulance service case study. So here, what happened was that the entire ambulance system was automated, and it was brought online, and within a couple of hours of the operation, we identified that there was a software bug which was resulting into the false alarm. So the entire application was brought down. Then we had Therac 25, where nearly 5 people lost their life because in an ECG machine, the amount of radiation which was to be passed on was 5 times more, uh, which resulted into a catastrophic event. And that particular thing is also there. Then US Mariner one is another thing. Intel's Pentium chip were brought back from the market just because there was a divide by zero error. AT&T lines went dead in the US, so that was also just because of some software induced error. So these are like some of the past incidents which uh, resulted into people focusing more on software testing. Now let's talk about the principles of software testing. So the principle says like find out the defects before the customer finds them, because if my end user is coming back with the application saying that whatever you have provided is a buggy application, then uh, obviously there are some issues. Then I need to test the test first. That means what kind of data I'm firing, right? If I have a calculator program and I'm passing on, uh, I'm passing on, uh, an image as an input, that does not make sense, because whatever output I'll give, I'll not be able to judge the actual working of the particular program. Then I need to understand the reason behind the test to be performed. What's the rationale behind this particular application? Then I need to go for defect prevention and defect detection, and also I need to the software application. Now, this is the effect of defects on the software costs. So, if suppose I have observed the defect at the time of requirement, so I'll be paying 10 times the cost, right? If I'm going ahead with like post release, so it would be 1,000 times. So that's just imagine if suppose I've released the product and post release I'm observing some issues with the applications. In that case, the overall cost goes to this, and that would be from my pocket. That means from the developer's pocket, because already we have signed something. We have signed a document which says that okay, I'll provide an error-free document at this budget. But when I have released this, I found that there are issues. In that case, obviously, once again, I have to really look into my design documents. I need to really look into my coding. I need to re-look into the testing once again. So that would be something which is time consuming. Now, so this was about the basics of testing. The next part we'll be dealing with is it's a kind of brushing up some of the topics. And for that sake, what I've done is I've created this particular video. So we'll switch to this particular video, and the next video we'll cover these two. We are going to cover your software testing, software development lifecycle models. We are going to brush up this particular topic, and then what we'll do is like if suppose there are network issues at your end, you can switch to this and the next video, which is part 3 and 4, so that that would be for your comfort. So let's switch to this particular videos today. So welcome back. In this particular video, we are going to talk about something which is called as your SDLC. That means your software development lifecycle model. This SDLC, or the software development lifecycle, is nothing but a process. This process helps us in producing softwares with high quality and low price. That means the aim is to optimize everything. On one side, I'm talking about high quality, and on the other side, I'm talking about low price. So this SDLC is providing us a very well structured flow for the processes which are involved in order to help an organization to quickly produce a high quality software application. And that's what the ultimate aim is. So your SDLC works by lowering the cost while simultaneously improving the quality aspect. And this can be achieved, of course, lowering the price can be achieved by reducing the production time, right? So I can reduce the production time, and that ultimately helps in lowering the cost. That's something which is a major point of concern, that a particular project should not go beyond the deployment date, because then you have to pay the penalty, you have to pay for all the people involved in developing the particular application. So this particular plan starts by evaluating your existing systems for the existing deficiencies, and later on we take certain steps which I'll explain you with the help of this particular diagram. So this is nothing but a generic SDLC, and one of the SDLC model, which is waterfall model, is totally almost dependent on this particular part. So what it does is that, as you see from the figure, I go ahead with the requirements gathering and analysis. So what I do is I'll try to identify the requirements specified by the client, and I'll do some analysis that are there any problems associated. So this particular SDLC takes input, this particular phase of SDLC is taking inputs from all the stakeholders. That can be your end user, or it can be your developers, salespeople, industry experts, programmers, and so on and so forth. And I'll try to identify the strengths and weaknesses of the current system, and in order to improve the overall application. That's what the ultimate aim is. So this is something which is very crucial stage in your SDLC. So normally the senior members of the team will give inputs, and these inputs will be from both the ends, from the customers and from the sales department, and maybe some surveys they might have done in order to come up with a quality product. So this particular input is then used to plan the initial steps and to identify that, okay, whether the things which we are planning is feasible or not, right? Whether it is feasible or not. And it's like, let's say I'm running a company with 5 employees. I'm taking a project which I have to deliver in 10 months, and it needs 200 employees simultaneously working. So practically it's not possible for me. I'll take 2-3 months in order to recruit these many people. So I do this feasibility study in this particular phase. Now once I'm done with it, I'll go for plan, where I'll see that, okay, what exactly I want from this planning. So in this particular phase, my team will go ahead with determining the cost and the resources and the number of plans. So it can be number of peoples involved. So it can be your plans plus sub-plans. Sub-plans may be that, okay, what will be the software requirements, what will be the hardware requirements, whether we have to move towards cloud or not, whether the requirement, based on the requirements, whether we'll be able to provide this thing in-house, or I need to get in touch with a third-party developer to provide some resources or not. So all those plannings, it's like, if suppose I go ahead with coming up with a building, let's say I have to come up with a new hostel, so I need to plan that, okay, how many people I need, what should be the budget, and then whether I need some approvals or not, some machineries I need. So those things, in case of softwares, I need to look for whether I need some licenses or not. So all these things we'll plan in this particular phase. After which, once I'm done with it, I'm okay. Let's say that, okay, I will be able to come up with this particular product. So I take a call and then I'll go ahead with designing. So in this, I'll refer to my SRS. Now, SRS stands for Software Requirement Specification. This has all the details of what all things the customer has asked for. So based on this SRS, I'll go ahead with design documents. So what I'll do is, I'll first of all refer this SRS, which will work as a reference. It will help the architects to come up with the software architecture. Right, so this SRS will help me in coming up with my software architecture. And this is something which is a high level design. Right, software architecture is something which is a high level design. We'll separately talk about software architecture as well. And based on this, I'll come up with the design documents, because all those designs will be there, right? All your UML, UCADs and everything will be added to it. Now, this design approach will give me an idea about the modules of the product, along with all the communications and all the kind of data flows and the control flows that will be proposed in this particular problem, right? So this is something which is a crucial phase, just because we'll be collecting and incorporating all those design decisions in my document. Now, once I finalize and I freeze these design documents, I go to this developing and coding phase. In this particular phase, the actual development of the product starts. Actual development means now I'll start coding. Now the role of programmer comes into picture. I'll refer to the detailed design documents, and based on that, I'll start coding. All my, I'll use class diagrams in order to come up with the class structures and all. And in this particular phase, these developers will, inform all the usages of compilers, interpreters, debuggers, or whatnot. We'll be going ahead with maybe a high level language, which is like C, C++, Pascal, Java, PHP, or whatnot. It depends. It depends on whatever has been specified and what all potentials I have. I'll go ahead with that. Now, once I'm done with coding, I'll move to the testing phase. This means that I'll ensure that whatever I have coded works fine or not. So I test this particular piece of code which has been passed on from this design or coding phase. Once it is tested, now it's high time to deploy. Now this deployment means I will go ahead with the deployment of this particular product in the market. See, I've tested the product, my product is ready. So it's high time to deploy it. That means I should release this particular product formally in the market. So that says that I am releasing this particular product. It's like, let's start using whatever we have got. And the goal of the software deployment phase is making the software product run in the production environment so that the actual usage starts now. Although these days, many organizations, they prefer to move the product to the different deployment environment and then they bring it online. So letting it work offline and then bringing it online. This also is done in case of financial, all the applications which are in the financial market. So where the efforts to ensure the safety is very high. Now, once my product is deployed, my end user may report some issues with the product. So I need to maintain this particular product. Now, this maintenance is not due to the issues only. See, one thing is for sure that there are some issues. Another thing can be there are some updates required just because the end user has asked for a new functionality. In that case also I need to go for maintenance. So in that case we enter into a maintenance phase, bring some changes. It can be updation, it can be removing some bugs or errors, and that particular thing is of course done post deployment. So this is all about a generic software development life cycle. Now let's see, there are some software development life cycle models. In this particular course we'll talk about waterfall model, prototype model, your rapid application development model, your spiral and iterative model, your V model, and the fountain model. There are some more models as well, but we'll restrict our discussion to these 6 models only. To start with, what we'll do is we'll go ahead with waterfall model. This is why I have added to this to the first number, is that it is directly related to your generic software lifecycle model. That means if you remember the stages of generic software development lifecycle model, then you can take a call on what will be the waterfall model, right? So it's almost a kind of replica, the same diagram represented in a different manner. So let's see what basically the waterfall model is. So this waterfall model is also known as your linear sequential life cycle model. So in some of the literatures you will find this particular name, and this is one of the very first software development life cycle to be introduced. A very simple one, very easy to understand and very easy to use, just because it is a bit stringent. So there are some drawbacks as well. We'll talk about those drawbacks in the coming slides. So one of the earliest approach, and of course it illustrates the software development life cycle. Just now we studied this SDLC. That's what it does. And all these activities of a project is broken down into the linear sequential phases. That's why it is called as your linear sequential life cycle model. So what we have is, in the first phase we do the feasibility study. So we try to identify that the project which we are going to take is feasible for my company or not, whether I'll be able to come up with this particular software system or not, software solution or not, whether the problem itself is not solvable, so I may not be able to come up with the software solution. So that kind of feasibility study is done. Once I identify that, okay, yes, this particular problem can be solved, then what I do is I go ahead with requirements gathering. Right. In this particular phase, the detailed requirements of the system is gathered. So requirements to be gathered. Once I have gathered the requirements, I'll go ahead with design. I need to come up with the design documents. Once I'm done with the design documents, let's code. Once I'm done with coding, let's test it. After testing, deploy it. And if required, maintain it. So this is almost similar to what we studied in a generic software development lifecycle model. But there are some issues associated with it. Also, in some of the literatures, you'll find that testing and implementation is clubbed into one. Or maybe design and coding clubbed into one. So don't get confused. Just make sure that all these things are strict phases, and one can move from one phase to another once a particular phase gets over. That's something which is a major drawback, This is something which is a major drawback of this particular one. So it's like error can be fixed during one phase only, because let's say after testing I have found that there are some errors, so I cannot move back to the previous phase, and that's something which is a major drawback. So let's quickly talk about the benefits of this model. First of all, it is very easy to understand and it is easy to use as well. And this particular model is providing me the structure to my inexperienced staff, because they know that once one phase gets over, then only I'll be moving to the next phase. So there is a simple structure, and if my staff is inexperienced, so I know that I have to only inform to my staff that firstly finish this phase, then move to this particular phase. And in this one, your milestones are well understood. I know when to start, when to stop, and when to move to the next phase. Since I cannot move back to the previous stage, so I need to have a freezed requirements. Right. My requirement should not be dynamic and it keeps on changing. For example, let's say initially I, as a end user, I've said that, okay, I need an application on PHP. And when the coding starts, all of a sudden I say, no, let's go ahead with some other scripting language. So that's not possible in case of waterfall model. And it specifically, says that requirement should be freezed, it should be stable, then only use this particular model. And since everything is fixed, everything is pre-planned, so it is good for management control. That means planning, staffing, tracking. See, I know, let's say, I know that, okay, these two phases, or maybe these two phases need, 2 months of time. So I'll say that, okay, my design team should be free for first 2 months and then it should be ready. Then only my design team will come into picture. right? That's a time when I'll take a call that, okay, let's bring my design team and then go ahead with these particular discussions, right? So it's like it is easier to manage for planning, staffing, and tracking. And this works well when quality is more important than cost or schedule. Of course, looking at this particular structure, this is something which is time consuming, right? This is something which is time consuming. So it consumes a lot amount of time for each phase. So I need to have a very good budget. I need to have quality as a priority. In that case only I should go for waterfall model. So these were some benefits of using a waterfall model. Let's now talk about some of the drawbacks of the same model. So first thing is no flexibility. I cannot move from one phase to the previous phase. That's not possible. That's a major drawback. So moving back a phase or two can be a costly affair, because if I'm moving back, so I have to start the same thing again. And sometimes it can give me a false impression of progress. That means, although my testing wasn't done properly and I identified some bugs, and since the model says to move to the next phase, I'm not moving to the previous because it will be a costly affair. So I move to the next phase. So it is giving me a false impression of progress. On top of it, it does not reflect problem solving nature of software development. That means iterations of phases that I need to iterate, reiterate. If suppose I identify, that's what you do in your labs. If suppose you are having a data structures lab, you find some errors in your code, you try to identify and bring some changes. That means testing is done, identified some bugs, and then once again you have brought some changes to the application. But that's not possible in this particular case. Then we have like little opportunity for customers to preview the system. I don't have any prototype in this particular case. How my client is going to judge? I cannot get any prototype. So how my client is going to judge that how my system is going to look like? So that's something which is a major cause of concern in case of waterfall model. In addition to this, the documentation occupies a lot of time for developers and testers. And even the small changes or the errors that arise in the completed software may cause a lot of problems, because as I said, moving back to the previous stage is something which is very costly. So now let's try to identify that after all these benefits and all these drawbacks, where should I actually use the waterfall model? Now, this one point is which is common in every model, that the requirements are very well known. Now, this applies to each and every model. Use a particular model when requirements are very well known. When my product definition is stable, it's freezed, it's fixed. Then go ahead with waterfall model. I have clearly understood the technology. I know the pros and cons. I know when to use. I know when to avoid. So all these things which when I have in mind, then I can go ahead with this. When I have a new version of an existing product, why so? Because I know the requirements well in advance. All the requirements are known to me. In that case, I'll go ahead with a new version of existing product. Another scope of using this particular waterfall model is when I'm porting an existing product to a new platform. Right. So this is specifically works in SPL. Now SPL stands for your software product lines. Right. So this works in software product lines. So this was all about waterfall model. But let's bring a minor change to this particular model. And this is one of the change, which is your iterative waterfall model. Now, this iterative model, waterfall model gives you a little bit of flexibility. Flexibility in the terms of moving from one phase to the immediate previous phase. That means I started from feasibility study, I moved to requirement analysis. I observed that, okay, there are some changes, I need to relook to the feasibility study, I moved back to the previous stage. And once again, I've come back to this. From requirements analysis, I moved to design. I've identified that no, there are some issues with the requirements that has been identified with the design documents. Let's move to the previous one. Similarly, from the coding, I can move back to the previous design. From the design, I can move to the previous requirements. So, to the immediate previous one, that means from one phase to the immediate previous phase movement is allowed. And frankly speaking, this comes very handy because let's say I'm in testing phase, I need to go to coding phase, right? I can go ahead with this because here I have identified some bugs in the application. So I can immediately report and I'll say that, okay, let's code once again. Now, once again, the code has been passed to the testing team. Once again, I've identified some bugs. Let's once again go back to the coding phase. So this kind of movement is allowed, and this kind of movement is very handy as far as the development is concerned. So some of the major drawbacks, which was like this waterfall model, which is like very stringent, right? Freezed, fixed. So some amount of flexibility I can observe here. I'm easily moving to the previous phase. From the implementation, I observed something and I'm immediately going back to the testing phase. Even from the coding, I observed that no, based on the design documents, the coding is not fitting well. Let's move back to this design phase. And from design, once again, I can come back to the coding phase. So all these iterations can be made in this particular iterative waterfall model. And this makes this particular waterfall model very handy. That means in this we observe that, okay, this particular movement, not possible. This particular movement, not possible. This particular movement, not possible. So all these things are possible in this particular approach of iterative waterfall model, right? Moving from one direction to the other, this is possible in this particular case. So this was all about waterfall model and a slight modification to the waterfall model resulting into an iterative waterfall model. In our next video, we'll talk about something which is called as prototype model, where we'll see that, okay, there is a prototype available and based on which I yeah, friends, now we'll switch to this particular video which I've shared with you all. That would be for today's discussion. So we started with the basic definition of software development life cycle. We looked into what basically a generic software development life cycle looks like and what actually it does. And then we talked about some of the possible options of software development life cycle models, where we started with your waterfall model, where we identified that, okay, this is something which is almost equal to a generic software development life cycle, but the way it is made is like it's a kind of waterfall, right? So that's why it is named as waterfall model. And then we saw some of the advantages of waterfall model, some of the drawbacks of it, and when to use it. And then we saw that okay, there is a possibility of bringing a small change to this waterfall model because there were several drawbacks. So to overcome some of the drawbacks, we brought some minor changes. So this waterfall model became iterative in nature. So now this time we have an iterative waterfall model. So what we see is that we have an option of moving towards the immediate previous phase. So in today's discussion, we are going to talk about a prototype model. So what basically prototype model is that this particular model, before carrying out the development of the actual software, it creates and comes up with a prototype of a to be built application. Now this prototype is a miniature, or maybe you can say a toy implementation of the actual system. And this is a very raw version of the actual system with limited capabilities and limited quality attributes. And the basic purpose is to give the end users or the clients a general view of what your software is going to look like and how it is going to function in the coming days. Now, what we do is that we come up with a prototype, share it with the end users, get some feedbacks. So what we do is we see there is an involvement of my end client as well, for which I'm going to come up with this application. So we get some feedback, and this feedback gives us a scope of bringing some initial level improvements. And if suppose my client is happy with the prototype, I'll go ahead with coming up with this actual application. So what we do is we come up with a prototype, we build it, we test it. If required, we rework on it until and unless the prototype reaches to the acceptance level. And with the help of it, we get an image of a to be built application. So mostly in case of prototypes, it's like you can say a kind of a sample product and the initial version of the actual product. So this works best in the scenarios where your project requirements keeps on changing and are not in detail. So it's like it's an iterative process where we see some trial and error method taking place just because we try something, get the approval from the clients, so we may fail and or we may succeed. So we go ahead with this trial and error kind of thing. So this prototype model is nothing but an information gathering technique. In this, we see the users' reactions, suggestions, innovations, and the revision plans or the feedbacks from your end users or the end clients. In this model, your developers will be building a prototype which is evaluated by users. And post evaluation, we go ahead with the refinement of this prototype. And once the user gets satisfied, then your prototype is brought up for a final product. That means the same prototype, the moment it gets a green signal, is brought up for your final product. So let's quickly see what basically what's the basic purpose and how it looks like. So in this particular model, what we are trying to do is we are trying to feed these initial set of requirements. So once we get this initial set of requirements, we do the initial level of designing. Of course, for designing requires planning as well. Post designing, we build this prototype, and this prototype is passed on for the customer's evaluation. So we seek the feedback from the end user. That means the client for which I'm building this particular product. And once the customer is satisfied, I go ahead with the actual development, then testing and the maintenance. Or if suppose the client says no, client is not happy with this prototype. So in that case, I'll go ahead with review and updation part. Once again, I'll bring some minor changes or major changes to the design. Once again, I'll bring the changes to the prototype. Once again, I'll seek the feedback. If this time customer is happy, let's go for the development, testing and maintenance, or else once again enter into this loop. So that's how it works. That means what we do is we take the requirements, we go for a quick design. From quick design, we build prototypes. After building prototype, what we do is we seek user evaluation. And post user evaluation, what we do is we refine the prototype. And this particular thing keeps on happening. And once the client is happy, I'll go ahead with your implementation and maintenance phase. So that's how it works. In case of your requirements gathering and analysis, your prototype model will be starting with this particular phase, and the requirements of the systems are defined in detail. And during this process, your user of the system will be interviewed in order to know what basically the user is expecting from this particular system. And then we'll go ahead with this quick design, which is the second phase in which we have a preliminary design or a quick design. That means a very simple design is created, because we know that there will be several refinements in it. Once this is created, this particular design will not be considered as a complete design, right? So this particular quick design is a simple design, not a complete design. It is simply giving me some basic idea of the system, which will be helping the end user to analyze. And it will also help the designers to come up with the prototype. So while building prototype, I'll get some idea that in this particular phase, that means right now I have reached to this particular phase, an actual prototype is designed, which is based on the information gathered from the simple or the quick design. So basically it is this particular building prototype will be giving me a small working model of the to be built application, right? That means I'll get something like this. Now Then we go ahead with this user evaluation. And this is something which is an initial level user evaluation. So our proposed system is presented in front of the end user or the end client. And this is for the sake of the initial evaluation. Now this will help us in finding, some of the strengths or weaknesses of the working model. So what the developers do is they collect the feedbacks, comments, or some suggestions, and then they refine this particular prototype which was built here, right? So this particular thing will be refined here. That means if suppose my end client is not happy with this particular prototype which I have come up with, in that case I'll be refining this present prototype in accordance to whatever has been suggested during this user evaluation phase. And this particular phase will not be over until all the requirements or the feedbacks or the specified points are not met by this prototype. And once the user is satisfied with the help of this prototype, a final system is built. So we go into implementation and maintenance. That's why there is a major issue with this. The issue is with this thing. The problem is that I may enter into a vicious circle, an infinite loop, a never-ending loop. That means every time my end user will say that no, I'm not happy with the prototype. Once again, I'll go ahead with this. Once again, it will say no, I'm not happy with it. Once again, I'll go into this. Once again, it will say no. Once again, I'll go into this. So it's like I'll enter into a vicious circle of coming up with a prototype, seeking a feedback, and then once again entering into the same circle, repeating the same efforts again and again. Now there are several types of prototyping model as well. Now the first one is your rapid throwaway prototype. Another one is your incremental prototypes. Another one is your evolutionary prototypes. And your last one is extreme prototypes. Now, in case of your rapid throwaway, this particular thing is based on the preliminary requirements. That means the rapid throwaway prototypes are based on your preliminary requirements. This is something which is quickly, from the name you might have got an idea that this is something which is quickly developed. And ultimately aim is to show how the requirements will look visually. And your customer's feedback helps in driving the changes to the requirements. And the prototype is once again created until the requirements is not met. That means my end user is not happy. So in this particular technique, a developed prototype will be discarded and will not be a part of ultimately accepted prototype. And this particular technique is, of course, useful for exploring some ideas and getting some instant feedbacks for the customer's requirements. So this was about rapid throwaway prototypes. Now let's talk about incremental prototypes. So what happens here is your final product is decimated into small prototypes. So there is one typo in this particular case, it's prototype. And each of these small prototypes are developed individually. And then all these prototypes are merged into a single product. So now this particular method will be very handy in order to reduce the feedback time between the user and the application development team. So the good point is that since now it would be like, let's say a product has 4 small prototypes, right? So I have like P1, P2, P3 and P4. So all these are developed parallelly and the developers are seeking feedbacks from the end users in parallel. So definitely it is, all these P1, P2, P3 are small ones, and feedback is received and there is a continuous improvement in this particular field. So once all these things reaches to the final stage, that means P1 reaches final stage, P2 reaches final stage, P3 reaches final stage, P4, then this end product will be your, let's say, a bigger P, that would be nothing but P1 plus P2 plus P3 plus P4, and ultimately it will be reducing a good amount of time. And that's what our ultimate aim should be. So this particular thing comes out to be very handy and a very improved version. Now, this was all about your incremental prototype. Now let's talk about evolutionary prototypes. So in this particular one, your prototype is developed incrementally and is refined based on customers' feedback until it is finally accepted. So what we do is, now in this particular case, developing a prototype from scratch for every interaction of the process can sometimes be very frustrating. So incrementally, let's say from P1 I reach to P2, so I'll refine P2 only, not P1. From P2 I reach to P3, so this time I'll refine P3. P2, P1 are the gone cases. So in this case also, it's not like every time I have to refine this P1. So this also saves a lot amount of time. And this particular model will be helpful for a project which will be using a new technology which is not well understood. And it is also used for very complex project where functionality must be checked once. This is also handy when the requirement is not stable. In fact, your prototype model, all the prototype models are useful when the requirements are not stable. So this was about evolutionary prototype. Now let's talk about extreme prototypes. So this extreme prototypes is commonly used in case of your web development. Now this particular thing consists of three phases. The first one is basic prototype with all the existing pages present in the HTML format. Right. So basic prototype plus all the HTML formats. In the second one, simulate the data processing using a prototype service layer. And in the third one, integration takes place. Integration of all the services into a final product. So once again, this comes very handy as far as your web development is concerned. Now let's quickly see some of the benefits of prototype model. So one is that it can bring changes to the system very early in the development phase. Just because of this prototype in nature, in the initial, with the help of the initial design, I can bring some changes. And this particular thing addresses the user's needs and expectations as well. And if suppose I'm able to address the needs and expectations, so ultimately I'll be reaching the customer satisfaction, and that's what the ultimate aim is. Now, when to use this particular prototype model? When the requirements are unclear. And I should go for a planned and controlled prototyping. Or else what we saw was that we'll enter into a vicious circle. Go for regular meetings with the teammates. That gives you an idea that okay, what all changes we are making. At a very large scale, you need to approve a prototype and only then allow the team to move to the next step, because in the large application the team size will be high, large, and based on that everything will be interdependent. Now in this particular prototype model, the team communication should be very effective, and it encourages the innovation and flexible designing, because we know that I can bring some changes to my design. So this is also one of the major important advantage of using this particular prototype model. Now this is something which is very flexible. This is something which is very flexible in nature. And these prototypes can be changed or even discarded sometimes. This prototype also serves as the basis of operational specification as well. Right. So these are some of the uh, pros of using this particular prototype models. So there are some drawbacks as well. Managing this prototyping process is very difficult. As we said, it should be very well planned, then only it's possible, or else you will enter into a vicious circle. Now, this is something which is rapid and iterative in nature as well. The feedback is very important, right? Every time I need to seek the feedback. So it becomes a time consuming process as well. That means it's slow and time consuming. It may become a costly affair. So the cost of developing a prototype, if this goes beyond my budget, then I am in a heavy trouble, because that would be like total wastage. Sometimes I need to discard the prototype. Once again, it's a wastage. Now, if suppose my end user is encouraging me excessive changes, then also I'm entering into trouble, just because my budget will run over budget, right? That means we may come across a situation where my customer may not be willing to participate in the iteration cycle for longer duration. So once again, I may not get the feedbacks, and once again I may come up with a faulty prototype, or if not faulty, then the prototype with which my end customer is not happy. In some of the cases, there may be far too many variations in software requirements when each time the prototype is evaluated by the customer. It may result into a poor documentation just because my requirements are frequently changing. And in the very beginning, we said a software is complete when the product is associated with the document parts. And poor documentation, of course, not acceptable. Sometimes it becomes very difficult for software developers to accommodate all the changes demanded by the client. Right? All changes not acceptable. Now, after seeing an early prototype model, the customers may think that the actual product will be delivered to him soon. So, a false impression of product being developed will be there. Sometimes we may also come across a situation where my client may lose the interest in the final product just because he or she may not be happy with the initial prototype. Then on top of it, developers who want to build the prototypes quickly may end up being substandard, and the development and the solutions may also be substandard. So with this, we'll pause here, and we'll then be meeting in our next class, which is on Thursday.